This show is community sponsored. We'd love to have you as a Patreon member. Stick around a little bit later to learn more about that. This is Cup of Go for August 9, 2024. Keep up to date with the important happenings in the Go community in about 15, 20, 30 minutes per week. I'm Jonathan Hall.
And I'm Shai Ahmad.
Hey, Shai.
Hey,
Good to have
Jonathan.
you
Welcome back.
Missed you last week. We had our some scheduling snafus.
Summer do be like that.
Indeed.
This episode is also not edited by our professional grade editor because they're taking a vacation, and we're totally here for that. They even won't hear us talking about this because I assume they don't listen to the show if they don't have to edit it. So isn't this a good place to just thank Filippo for all the hard work
Thanks,
on
Filippo.
editing the show?
Hey, editor, put in some clapping
No,
cheers.
no, I'm editing this episode. Don't do any of this editor stuff. All right. So I think we're all excited for the Go 1 to 3 to be here. Is it here yet? Did you refresh?
It's not. I've been refreshing every 30 seconds. It's not here yet.
But there are 2 minor releases.
It might be here by the time the show is edited, though, and uploaded.
It takes so long to edit. We might be at 124.
Yeah, we do have a couple minor releases. Go 122.6 and 121.13 are out. I predict this is the final edition of 121, and that 123 will be out very, very soon.
And why do these releases stand out to you?
Because they're not a security fix. This wasn't a secret, don't tell anybody what's happening. This was just oh, by the way, we fixed some things.
So you think it's like a final, clearing the table before the
I
next
think
guest
so.
set in?
Based on the pattern I've started to notice for previous releases, they do one of these, and then a few days later they do the big one. So we'll see. I could be wrong, but we'll see.
Today, at the time of the recording, it's Peter Aronoff's birthday. Peter, happy birthday, man! But looks like the release team is not planning to get you a gift. So you'll have to just get flowers from someone. I don't know. Funnily enough, Peter, I don't know if you meant this on purpose, but you said, my birthday is Friday, so if anyone from the release team is looking to get me a nice gift, a nice gift is literally my name, Shai Ahmad in Hebrew. So I read that in English. I did a double take. So no gift for Peter, but a small patch release with no security issues, and the issues that are actually fixed are very minor, right? It's like, edge case, whatever, empty profiles sometimes on an edge case. But I do want to discuss the IPv4 backed IPv6 vulnerability. That wasn't fixed in this release, though, right? It was a few releases back.
Yeah, this is a couple months old, I guess, but it came up on our Slack channel last week, so it's worth talking about.
Is it worth talking about? What makes a vulnerability worth talking about? What would you look at? Because there are a lot of vulnerabilities. You can't talk about them all.
That's true. I think this is worth talking about in our context in particular, because our listeners were discussing it. But the broader question is a security vulnerability worth looking at or talking about. Is it likely to affect me? That would be my first question.
You need like some metric to know, hey, is this high importance, low importance? Is this critical, right?
Yeah.
So I've had a lot of discussions about that generally. So let's tackle the specific issue first, right? Do you know what is a loopback IP address or a private IP address?
Yeah. Do I need to explain, or is
just given IP addresses have some attributes, right?
Yeah,
they might be the loopback address, and they might be private, which means they're on a private network. And then you might have rules in your application that are different for, let's say, private IP addresses, right?
Sure.
That makes sense. You're a server, and you have a public-facing endpoint and a private-facing endpoint, like towards the internet with one network interface, and towards your internal network with the other. And for the internal request, you don't need to run authentication or whatever. So you skip it. The way you skip it is you call is private or is loopback or is like blah blah from the Go code, right? These methods do not work as expected, which usually vulnerabilities, that's how you know, it's a bug that can also be exploited for some problematic stuff. The specific CV we're talking about, 2024-24790, I mean, is that various is whatever methods, like is private and is loopback, do not work as expected. Not if you're looking at normal IPv4 addresses, but if you're looking at IPv4 mapped IPv6 addresses.
Right.
So I didn't know what these were. They were news to me. Do you know what these are? IPv4
so.
Mapped IPv6 addresses?
IPv6 notation for an IPv4 address, right?
Yeah, so it's, for some reason, there was a small bug there where you look at like an address that's mapped to a different address, and if you're calling is whatever on that like mapping because you want to just use IPv4, let's say your software code only supports IPv4, but in reality the device like has IPv6, outward, so your operating system allows that, which makes sense, you know, internally on the machine, like a symlink between IPv4 and IPv6. People told me the world is going to run out of addresses when I started learning networking in 2011. Didn't happen yet, so I'm not too worried. But there is IPv6, right? Exactly for that, has a wider range of addresses. But if your program doesn't support it, then you have IPv4 mapped IPv6 addresses. Discussion on the channel started by Mihai. Shout out Mihai. Long-standing community member of the show.
Yeah.
Is why is this critical? It got a critical score, so 9.8.
9.8. That's almost the highest, right? Isn't 10 the highest?
Exactly. One louder.
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
So it is almost the highest, but you know how in school we had some teachers where everybody got, I don't know what's the scoring system when you grow up. Was it like A plus? Like
Yeah.
So a teacher that gives everybody A's, and then someone sometimes gets an A plus. So the A doesn't mean anything, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I had a discussion at work because I read this and I was like, "What's the exploit? Like, what can I do with it?" And the description doesn't say anything, which is really annoying. Like, it doesn't really have good, documentation on NVD, which is the national, like from NIST, the National Vulnerability Database, that gives it again a 9.8 and critical. You can look at the change log, but both contributors who reported this vulnerability, they don't have anything. Like, the issue is it doesn't contain any extra information. So I actually looked at the code and tried to think about how I would exploit it. You know, you just see someone backporting the issue. You can take a look at the change itself, like on Garrett, right? And you need to just check if the address is a V6 mapped to V4 address. I couldn't locate the the two original security researchers, Anzi Wang and Jinchan Chen. Like, they had some Twitter accounts, but they were all in Chinese, and I couldn't reach them. It really bugged me. So I contacted one of the security researchers from Orca, someone who does it for a living, and she basically said it was really just totally on the nose. Just to be fair, why is this a security issue in general? It might emphasis on the might, allow an attacker to connect to a service that is shielded with someone doing is private. So you know how the case I mentioned before, you have a service that has a public endpoint and a private endpoint, and the private endpoint doesn't have authentication or something like that, right? Because it's internal.
Yeah.
Because of this issue, you might, I think it's a 50% chance, if it's true or false, accidentally step into an endpoint that you shouldn't be able to access if the only protection is private.
Yeah. Okay.
So I can't really see how someone does only IP level protections.
And certainly, attacker couldn't engineer this really. Like, if they're lucky, they might be in a situation where they could exploit it, right?
For sure. And even so, that means that these endpoints are like worth something. Okay, I want to access this admin API, but it's only for private IPs to connect to it. I still imagine like you need a token or whatever, just for the system to work, not like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this seems super impractical to me, and the score still didn't sit well, even after I figured it out. And then I talked to Bal Kaduri from Oka. She's like the head of research. He's just doing things in Black Hat right now, et cetera, et cetera. And she was like, I'll give you the short of it. CVSS v3 sucks. The quote. There's a huge bias there towards the higher scores. And then she gave me a link. I shared it in the channel as well. We should probably put it in the show notes. To look at other vendors. Because, you know, NVD is not the only place that gives scores to vulnerabilities. And when you open Sneak Security, for example, they give it a much more reasonable 6, right?
Out of 10?
Yeah, 6.2 out of 10. So, you know, they still say, hey, you should probably upgrade. And by the way, if you do want to upgrade, it's very easy because it's just like upgrading the Go library, no problem. Upgrading the Go patch version, which you should do anyway, right? But this was just interesting to me to see this disparity between the NVD, which marks it as critical just because it can be accessed and it can happen, to, in my opinion, a lot more reasonable and less panicky Sneak and Red Hat and like a few other vendors that market it as 6. And on CVSS v4, which the NVD should be moving to anytime now, it should get a low score as well. So this was a whole, you know, storm in a teacup over nothing, really, which is very frustrating to me as a security practitioner, right?
Yeah.
Like, we have real security issues to worry about that we need to fix. We don't need to mark is private for IPv6, IPv4 mapped addresses as critical. Anyways, this was just an interesting rabbit hole to fall down into. But in reality, if all you care about is how did it happen, you can take a look at the changelog. It's IPv4, IPv6. I assume anything that has IPv6 in it has some bugs, right? Because who cares? You only test on IPv4 anyway. And the fix is trivial, and you can already upgrade and get it. So if you're worried about this specific thing, just upgrade to the latest patch version, assuming you're on a supported Go version, right?
Very cool.
So that does it for this CVE. Hopefully no more shenanigans in CVE scores, but honestly, probably shenanigans still await us for the next, like, I don't know, few years.
Yeah, let's talk about some proposals, or a proposal at least. I think there's only one on the backlog for the week to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Everybody's busy for 1 to 3.
Yeah. So this proposal has an interesting history that goes back many years. This particular proposal was proposed in 2020, January of 2020. The proposal is to add a context method to testing.t. So you can, the idea is to be able to pass along cancellation signals to your test. The interesting thing about this is it was actually proposed and accepted and implemented and then reverted back in 2016.
Wow. So we're proposing it again.
Yes.
All right.
So the idea is simple enough. The idea is your test should be able to, if you want to honor a context and do some cleanup. So suppose you hit Control-C while your tests are running. You want to close up your database connections or remove temporary files or those sorts of things, right? So I think everybody agreed that that's a good idea to do that. The problem was back in 2016 when this was implemented, there were some concerns that just passing along the cancellation signal isn't enough because there's no mechanism to actually wait for that cleanup to happen. So we could tell your test process, start cleaning up, and then the process ends before the cleanup has actually been done. So this has been reproposed now. Now that we have this new test .cleanup capability that allows you easily to do cleanup that is guaranteed to happen before the process exits. It's been reproposed.
I can get a context out of T in the same way that I can like do T.logf or T.fatal, and I can
Similar,
get
yeah,
a valid context for the test.
Yeah, I believe that is how it works. Yeah.
There's a interesting point here. If you want to test things that actually use things in the context, right? You want to, let's say, pass a trace ID within the context and then test that the logs contain the trace ID. You should probably generate your own context, right? This is just in case you have external dependencies that you want to clean up, database connections, like you said, temporary files changing into directories, stuff like that, right?
So I mean, you could always wrap the context you get from the test with your
yeah, that's what I mean. Like you get the
T
T.context and then you create a new one from it with your needed key values for the test.
Right.
I'm wondering if I have a test today that just creates a context.background, I'd probably want some linter to let me know that, hey, you should consider at least using T.context. Because if I don't care what context I pass in, then I should, like, it's cleaner code, right? I just use something from T instead of just using whatever, but instead of using like context.todo. But on the other hand, I read the tests. I can't copy paste the code out of tests into main, right? Because in main I don't have T. So the tests as documentation is becoming a bit worse. But for the actual use case of cleaning up stuff, it sounds like a pretty useful proposal.
I can actually also see this being quite useful anytime I start a go routine in a test. Like, say, for example, I'm running an HTTP server in a test. I could use this context to shut that server down at the right time, rather than having to do my own mechanic to do that.
Oh, that's interesting as well. But if you share it between, is the context test specific or is it for the whole process?
So the documentation in the accepted comment says context returns a context that's canceled just before T.cleanup is called. So the test is completed running. It's either failed or passed. It doesn't matter for this. The test is completed running, but the cleanup functions have not been called yet.
Oh, I understand. This is on a very low level. This is really cool. I imagine the use cases with running on GitHub CI or whatever, where the runners always crash, or if you're running on your CI on Kubernetes and your job is getting evicted in the middle. Actually, having confidence that the pod failed, but that doesn't mean all our resources are borked now, and someone's going to have to go in and reset the image. That could be like reset the container resources. That could be really useful, but it does require your code to actually support getting a context and using the cancellation thing correctly, right? So if you don't have cleanup working well for you right now, this is not going to help you. You need to have that set up first.
Exactly.
But a good proposal. Is it in? No, it's likely accept.
It's likely accept. So maybe next week or the week after we'll have a final word on that one.
I think this is also, again, I say this every time, and then I look at the change list and I'm like, oh, I'm stupid. But this sounds like a super easy thing to implement, right?
It sounds that way, although the test internals are kind of complicated. So I don't know. I wouldn't place a big bet on that until I look at the internals of the test code.
Right? I'm wondering if it was implemented in the past already, right? So you can even take
in that sense,
previous
it's just
attempt.
revert and you're done.
Yeah. I love these commits the most. In look at the main branch of your project, like revert commit, whatever. Cool. So likely accepted proposal in a pretty slow proposal week as we're prepping for a big release coming up. So Jonathan, I'd like to get your opinion on something.
I would love to give my opinion on something.
What's your sentiment about AI?
Mixed.
How do you feel about AI? So the Stack Overflow developer survey for 2024, the results are out. I think about 3 months ago, we told people, hey, you should probably fill in that survey. And it was pretty long. I filled it in. Did you hand in,
I think I
your
did.
results?
I filled in so many surveys. I forget exactly which ones, but I'm pretty sure I did.
So first of all, 2 weeks ago, we had a really good interview, right? You had a pretty good interview. I listened to it on the car. It was pretty nice. With Alice from the Go team, the person who designs the user experience for Go, right? On the Go team.
Yeah.
And they're in charge of the Go survey.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't that.
No.
It's the general Stack Overflow developer survey, discussing things like developer profiles, which technologies they use. Obviously, AI is its own tab. How people work, like workplace trends, things about community, things like that. This is as usual, a pretty big survey with tons of data. I'm wondering what insights you picked up that were interesting to you.
So, have you looked at the top paying technologies part yet?
I tend to not look at that too much, but the most popular technologies that does meet my day to day. So you look at the professional developers, JavaScript is way up there, right? Because you have it both in back end and in front end, and the rich library ecosystem. And you have like SQL, HTML, CSS, and unfortunately Python is still on top. And I had to scroll down quite a lot to find Go at 14.4%, below PHP and below C++, below C#, below Java, and below Bash. Although I don't know how people can list Bash in the same list, but whatever.
Well, I was looking at the most highly paid technologies, and I think that's a good one to look at because it can help us feel really smug when talking to Rusters, because Go makes more money than Rust. On average, $131 more per year if you do Go than Rust. On the other hand, if you learn Perl or Ruby, you're going to make a heck of a lot more than doing Go. So I don't know if we actually feel that smug.
I always look at this metric and I'm wondering what's the relation of that metric? How much money you can earn as a software developer that is specialized in X or Y, versus my experience, which has been more of pick up a bunch of technologies and use whatever fits.
Yeah.
I can't imagine presenting myself as a Go developer, even though I'm pretty into Go because I know Python, and when I have to use Python, I'll use Python. And I know Rust, and when Rust is a better fit, if you don't need to do async, because async Rust is pain, and you really care about performance and correctness because I don't know, you're running on, you don't want to CrowdStrike, you don't want to pull a CrowdStrike, then it's a good fit. And when you just want to be productive and have the language move out of your way, and you can afford a garbage collector, sure, Go. I'd pick Go as my default. But what I've found is at some point of your level or your journey as a software developer, if we're talking about Google and things like that, how they have L5 software engineer, L6 software, more high level software engineering jobs, more senior, the language sort of fades into the background. You pick a good technology, you wouldn't work with a bad technology, but that's not defines how you make money. So I don't understand how this number works.
So I think they just asked two questions, and this is sort of a cross section of that. What languages do you use, and how much money do you make? So each person is likely in more than one bucket in this list. And I think that's pretty clear when you consider that Bash is its own thing. Nobody's going to call themselves a Bash developer. At least I
don't know.
not.
Maybe some DevOps people mostly hack together, Terraform and Helm using Bash. You could make it work.
Maybe so.
We have a Bash script at work that one of my team members developed. That evolved to the point of working with dictionaries in Bash.
Oh yeah.
And I'm horrified to see that it still somehow holds up and we haven't migrated to Go yet. There's obviously the admired and desired chart, which you can see every now and then. It's very confusing. I'll try to explain it.
It's very confusing.
The desired number means which language have you done extensive development work over the past year, and you want to continue next year, right? So it's how much I like it now, basically, and how much I want to continue working in it in the future. And what you see is, first of all, a really in a glaring statement about the human condition. The admired is also always higher than the desired. Like people say, "Oh, I really, really love Rust," but only 82% of people say they really, really love Rust. It's only 28% use it. So it's like or desire to use it, I guess.
And I have to interject. I think this labeling is completely wrong. Desired is fine, I'm sorry, admired is fine. I don't. These labels are just so confusing. So the actual questions that are asked are: which of these languages have you done extensive development work in over the past year, and which ones do you want to do next year? So, like the lower one, I guess that's called desired. That's really more like have used, and then admired is want to use.
This is sort of reminding me of your rant about what's the NPS?
Yeah.
Like you should just ask, have you used and are you planning to continue using, and then not label it any more confusingly. But anyways, as usual, Rust is really high up on that list because I think many people used it, but not for async work, and then or a really big project. So they're just familiar. They're right before the huge learning curve / the wall. Go has a pretty good score here as well, right? It's top 10 on the list. 23% desired and 67% admired. Which, if you compare it to, let's say, JavaScript is more desired but less admired. So people use it more but like it less. And it's really funny also to go down the list and see some very niche languages, and then just see some things that people don't like, right? Visual Basic, just people don't admire it and don't desire to work in it more.
What I want to see on this chart, which this chart does not demonstrate, is which languages do people use but not want to use. I want to see the ones that have, like, people are forced to use them, but wish they didn't have to, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So obviously there's the language bashing, there's the IDE wars, right? With Visual Studio Code, by the way, being the clear victor in this race.
Is it though? I've been having so many problems with that lately. We'll save that conversation for another time. Yeah.
Well, we can do editor wars on another time. And again, with a really good case of close, desired, and admired, you have Jira on top of, Jira and Confluence on top of the async tools. Every time people try to use it, they're like, "Oh, I hate Jira. I don't like it." This chart shows it. But people like Monday.com less, or Asana, or ClickUp. I don't know, by the way, what these companies have done. They probably bugged my house or something. But every single YouTube ad that I get is like, "Oh, sick of Jira, check out ClickUp," whatever. Funnily enough, everything old is new again, and we're rediscovering everything. Do you want to venture a guess of what async tool got the highest admired score?
I have to even know what
it's not Jira
tool means.
Jira, Notion, Obsidian, Trello, wikis, things like that.
So we're talking like under the broad umbrella of like project management stuff.
Yeah.
Which one got the best score?
The highest admired score. So, equivalent to like, oh, I want to work in Rust is I want to for async tools.
I have no idea. Notion,
Markdown
maybe?
files.
Markdown files.
Everything old is new again.
Yeah. Awesome.
Next up on the news, we have discovered networking. Like, I don't know. There's a really complicated and beautiful visualization here, which I don't understand, by the way, which is worked with versus wanna work with. So, it says basically that 60, I don't know, let's look at SQL, for example, right? 10,000 people who worked with SQL want to work with Python. And here,
Weird.
this is really weird because you have SQL and Python, and people are like, oh, I really, really want to work in a ton of different languages. JavaScript has the biggest slice, and they want to work in many, many different languages. There's a big highway between JavaScript and TypeScript. Like, people want to move to TypeScript. But if you look at Rust and Go, people who work in Rust and Go don't want to change languages. It's like in this graph, when you hover over Go, there's no way to change to another language. Same with Rust. So, people, once they get to Go or Rust, they tend to stay there.
We had some technical difficulties, but we're back again to round out the episode.
So overall, the Dev survey, it has a lot of respondents, right? Many people answered. I don't know if I gained any new insight from looking at the results, though. They're pretty similar to previous years. Nothing super surprised me. Mostly, I think maybe salary information could be useful, or if you're hunting for a job right now, because the market had a pretty rough reset. So it could give you a good ballpark of what salaries to ask for or something like that. But I haven't found any immense value in the insights. JavaScript is popular. Like, all right, Jira is still top of the list. Okay. The one thing that's different this year is all about AI, right? AI search and developer tools and using ChatGPT and Tab9, and people like it. And what's the top paying technologies? Okay, like Erlang is highly paid. And many people plan to use AI tools. So, these are just things that are sort of in this. I feel like I knew already. I don't want to shit on the survey. Like, if the survey is saying true things, that's at least a good. But I don't understand what's the value in it, at least for me when looking at it.
Well, I think that, like you said, I haven't learned anything earth shattering from this, but I think I see a trend that Go has reached its hype cycle and is on it and is entering the mainstream language phase of its life. 4 or 5 years ago, it was at the top of everybody wants to learn Go. Nobody's tried it yet. It sounds super exciting. Rust is kind of at that spot right now. And there's always Zig is probably going to jump to that point in the next couple of years. So there's a hype cycle around languages, and I think Go is on a downward trend. That's not a bad thing. It's a more mature language now. More people are using it, so there's fewer people who are in this sort of aspirational phase. But it's interesting to watch that happen.
Yeah, I think once you're in a hype cycle, you sort of need to reach escape velocity, right? To actually turn into a mainstream language, because you can be in the hype cycle and then like burn out and do just crash and burn. Again, the different thing about the results here are mostly about AI tooling and things like that. One of the things I like is that most professional developers do not perceive AI as a threat to their job. I am firmly in that camp. It is a sometimes useful tool right now, and I'm wondering, like, if AI safety regulations and things like that are going to pretty much keep it at the current level that it's at for the next few years.
I'm not an expert in AI. My personal feeling is that we kind of with ChatGPT and that whole generation of new tools, we kind of made it over a bump. But I don't. I think it's a bump, and I think that's it. I don't think we're like soaring off into the sky with new AI stuff that's going to revolutionize the world. I think we've already seen the big change. And
there is
cool.
one. Yeah, for sure. I definitely. I haven't heard of anyone who's getting replaced 100%, like a professional software developer. I think it is harder to be a junior right now, right? Because one or two projects on your GitHub page that can be immediately generated with AI, that's not good enough. There is satisfaction and job satisfaction, by the way. So if you're in a leadership position, like you're a team lead like myself, or a group manager or whatever, and you're listening, I think the like productivity impacts and developer experience part of the survey is interesting. Like, I'm the team lead for developer experience. So that particular tab I'm going to be sharing in Slack and talking about. This survey is by Stack Overflow, right? And the only actionable, clickable button on the survey is their products page, where you can buy Stack Overflow for Teams. So, when they look at productivity impacts, and then the first question is ability to find knowledge and information within your organization, that doesn't track with the things that, I've learned about developer experience and things that the Dora research team shows and things like that are like usually this is not the top contributor, driver, or predictor of productivity in an organization. To see that, look if you're using Python or Go, and then you'll have a pretty good idea. So that's the dev survey. You can,
and I think that's a program.
Yeah, you can squabble about the results, and is VS Code actually good or bad, and come fight Jonathan in our Slack channel. I think is a good chance to sort of let people know where they can reach us. So where can they reach us?
Yeah, the Slack channel is a great place. Cupago.dev is also a great place. It has links to all of the other places you can find us. Our social media accounts. Email, I think, is even there. If you want to email us, you can do that.
News at cupago.dev.
Yeah. You can become a Patreon supporter and provide a little financial support to help cover the cost of the show. Or you can share the link with your friends and colleagues.
Yeah, I really want to highlight our Patreon supporters as a way to make the show sustainable and actually take a part in the community. If you can kick $8 a month and you think it's worth it, this is just the most direct way to support us making the show. Kicking in $8 a month to make sure that we can continue doing this and not worry too much about costs. That's the best way to support us.
Until next time.
That's a show. Program exited. Goodbye. Program exited. Goodbye.